The retirement security project at Brookings is over a decade old. Now, I'm not going to blame Brookings, but I would note that over that time, concerns about retirement security have gotten more and more serious. Insecurity about retirement is not limited to those who are about to retire. It is the most widely felt economic fear in the US. I think of this issue as kind of like the weather. A lot of people talk about it, but precious few actually do anything. The most depressing, I ran the Pension Benefit Guaranty Corporation for 4 years, and I learned that the greatest source of statistics and the most depressing source of statistics was the Employee Benefits Research Institute, from which I steal shamelessly, but with attribution. Turns out that only 60% of people who retire, claim to have done any retirement planning at all. Now, the question is, what's planning? It turns out that less than half of all workers, this is also from an EBRI survey, say that they tried even to figure out what they would make when they retire, that they would try to figure out the numbers on the CFPB tool or the SSA tool. Now, do we think that those 44% got it right? Do we think that the 56% somehow neglected to mention it? This is not an issue that is limited to the poor and the uneducated. Another depressing survey was one done by Ameriprise. This was done by people close to retirement age who had investable assets of more than $100,000. Most of them were concerned about future healthcare costs. But most of them had never even asked what Medicare covers. And 40% of this group, remember, on the verge of retirement, $100,000 in assets, a prime candidate for Ameriprise, I should suggest. 40% had no financial plan and had not bothered to estimate their retirement income. So this is not a limited issue. It's not a minor issue. It is for that reason that we were glad to come and highlight the work of these agencies. It is also for this reason that we've invited a panel with broad expertise to discuss these issues. Their bios are available, but I'm going to talk a little bit since most of these folks are invited. Olivia Mitchell is on the faculty of Penn's Wharton School. She's executive director of the Pension Research Council. She's director of the Better Center on Pensions and Retirement Research. Those are only her Wharton affiliations. I'm not going to mention her work for the Social Security, the Treasury, the National Bureau of Economic Research, the University of Michigan, the Netherlands, Australia, Chile, or Singapore. But you can get all that on the website. Suffice it to say that Olivia is widely recognized as a preeminent expert on the issues of financial planning and financial literacy that concerns us today. To my immediate left, she's on my far left, to my immediate left, Jonelle Mart is the Washington Post reporter for Get There, its personal finance site. She covers a wide range of issues, not just retirement, wealth, credit, and taxes. Previously, she worked for MarketWatch on taxes and economics. Before that, she wrote for the Wall Street Journal, the Boston Globe, the Miami Herald. The Get There site says that Jonelle is nominally from New York, but actually from Miami, which means she got there earlier in life than most New Yorkers. To her left is Jean Satzfund, who is the Senior Vice President for Programs at the AARP. She leads AARP's educational and research efforts. So her job is both to write herself, and she does plenty of that, but to develop programs to educate people on retirement planning. She's been at AARP for over a decade. Before that, she was a business consultant advising asset management firms and financial institutions, and started at PricewaterhouseCoopers. She too has a Penn affiliation, a BA in economics, as well as an MBA. And so without further ado, Olivia Mitchell.
Great. Well, I am delighted to be Brookings Institution for including me. I really commend the cooperation between all these different institutions that we're hearing about today, especially the CFPB and the Social Security Administration, on the tool, but on the much broader set of issues that we're all working on and thinking about. I wanted to put what we heard this morning in the context of a great deal of research and learning that we've been doing over the last decade in concert with the ORES, the Office of Research and Economic Statistics at Social Security, and many, many academics around behavioral and economic finance. And so I'll just run very quickly through some of the learnings, some of the lessons that I take, again, as a backdrop or a context for the tool that we heard about. So echoing Director Cordray and Commissioner Colvin, I believe firmly that when to claim Social Security is many older Americans' most important financial decision they will ever make in their lifetimes. We cannot underestimate how critical that is. The data that I present, and if you want a copy of it, I'll give you a copy later. This is from the Health of Retirement Study. This is a survey we've been doing from 1992 to the present. We've surveyed 22,000 nationally representative Americans in their 50s, and we follow them through time. And with their permission and with Social Security's help, we've been able to link administrative records on their earnings and on their benefits. So we have an incredibly complete set of information on exactly what they have, what are their assets as they head into retirement. So if you can see this, this pointer doesn't seem to work. Okay, the red piece, the red bars in the middle, those represent from the poorest Americans to the richest Americans. Each bar is 5% of the older American population. The red bars represent the Social Security benefits. The blue striped are net financial wealth, so that's stocks, bonds, cash. The green is pension wealth, so that would include your defined benefit, expected benefits in the future, plus your IRAs, 401ks, and the black is net housing wealth. And one thing I wanted to call your attention to is if you look at the median household, the people right in the middle, that's kind of smack dab in the distribution, 40% of the median household's financial wealth, retirement assets consists of Social Security. It's still quite important as you go to the right. That is, Social Security is still a big factor. But if you go to the bottom 2 or 3 groups, you see pretty much Social Security is all there is. In fact, they're underwater because of credit card debt, home mortgages, which exceed the values of their houses. So this, I think, is the first fact that we should take with us, that keeping Social Security strong is absolutely essential. Now, we know, as we saw earlier with the tool, that if you delay claiming your benefits, this will buy you between 6 and 8% bigger benefits per year when you finally claim, say, for example, the following year. Claiming benefits later is similar to buying a larger annuity, with the purchase price of this annuity equal to the delay time getting the benefit a year later. If you stop working at 62, but you waited to claim until 70, your benefits would go up by 76% a month. And a lot of people don't know that. In fact, I testified before Congress last year, and some of the staffers and some of the members were themselves quite surprised. Plus, of course, you get better survivor and spouse benefits, and really there isn't any better asset. You can't really invest in a safe asset and earn 8% real. So it's an absolutely phenomenal thing, but many people still claim early. Why? So here I wanted to point very briefly to some financial literacy research that we've been doing. Unfortunately, Americans on the verge of retirement, as well as younger and older ones, are very financially illiterate. These are the so-called big 3 questions, which we've now implemented in a variety of countries around the world. Anna Maria Luzardi is my co-author. The first one, if you can't read it, is very simple. It says, let's say you have $100 in a saving account paying 2% interest a year. How much would you have in the account after 5 years? Now, we didn't really want to tax people too much with pulling out the calculator, so we gave them 3 possible answers. Less than 102, which is not the right answer, equal to 102, which is also not the right answer, and greater than 102. You could also say don't know or refuse. I'll show you what people said in a second. In terms of inflation, we said, imagine the interest rate on your savings account was 1% a year, inflation was 2%. After 1 year, with that money in the account, could you buy less than today, the same as today, or more than today? And obviously, inflation erodes the value of your purchasing power, so the right answer is less than today. And then finally, this one was the one that seemed a little bit more difficult, but you had a 50-50 shot. So the question was, true or false, buying a single company stock usually provides a safer return than a stock mutual fund. What's the right answer? False. Yeah. What do Americans say? So this is from a FINRA survey, but we've done this in a number of other contexts. A lot of people get the interest rate correct, but still not everybody. And these are people who have been making a lot of financial decisions over their lifetimes. Only 65%, close to 2/3, get it correct. Inflation, just a little bit less. The risk diversification question really shocked me because you had a 50-50 chance of getting it right. 52% got it right, and the rest either got it wrong or a third of Americans said, I don't know. And so the problem is that only half got the first two right, only 35% got all three. Moreover, the patterns change with age. This is in the health and retirement study, people in their 50s. So the interest rate question, age 60 and younger, more folks got it right. As you got older, 70 and older, you got it worse and worse. So performance seems to decrease with age. And that's another thing we have to be careful about. Then we also have tracked and compared financial literacy by sex. And this, again, is something we've seen in every country we've looked at. Typically, the men are more, blue is for boys, pink is for girls. So the men are much more likely to get the answers right. The women are less likely to get the answers correct. However, what's interesting about the women is they're much more willing to say, I don't know. Whereas the men, even when they're wrong, are highly confident about the fact that they think they know the answer. We also have done other breaks, which I don't have time to show you now, by race and ethnicity. Typically, non-whites, blacks, and Hispanics perform much less well. And so, again, financial literacy is pervasive. This could be another reason folks are claiming early. Just a couple of other thoughts in my limited time. Another reason people have claimed early is that many financial advisors, in fact, 75% of financial advisors, believe the right way to think about Social Security claiming is with the so-called break-even analysis. And you may not be able to read this, but the typical language is something like this. If you delay claiming from 62 to 63 years old, your monthly benefit will go up. We just saw that. For example, if you claim your benefit at age 63, your benefit will increase by $103 a month to $1,625. However, and this is the dreaded however clause, by delaying your benefit by 1 year, you will forfeit $18,588 that you would have received between 62 and 63. And by the way, you would need to have to live 15 more years for sure to get that money back. So what we've shown in a number of different surveys using the American Life Panel, you tell people this, and what do? They claim. They say, I don't know if I'm going to live for sure 15 more years, but the way you frame that presentation is absolutely important. So what can we do? What can be done? One of the things that I've been looking at most recently is the opportunity to reframe the way people think about the benefit increase they get if they delay claiming. Our proposal is to say to people, okay, if you delay claiming, instead of getting $103 extra a month the rest of your life, we will give you a lump sum, which would be exactly equal to that $103, but it would be a lump sum instead of a life annuity payment. You'd still get the initial benefit, it's just that the gain would be presented as a lump sum. And we estimate, based on our experimental research, that people would delay claiming about 2 years. They're still getting their base benefit and they're getting their increment, but they are willing to delay in order to get the lump sum. lots of good reasons. Some people say that, they do it because they might have lack of confidence in Social Security. Some people are just risk averse. They don't know how long they're going to live. They want the extra benefit. Interestingly, a lot of people would work longer as well. And the final kind of nugget that I found interesting was the people who are currently claiming early would be the ones who would delay claiming the most and work longer if you gave them a lump sum as an alternative. So, by the way, longer work lives could be better for Social Security, could also be better for us, because there's beginning to be a lot of research suggesting that early retirement is not good for you. So what works? Obviously, as we heard earlier, and as the commissioner and as the director talked about, financial education in the schools and the workplace is critical. There's so many decisions that people make now to put their feet on the wrong path from very young. Credit card debt, payday loans, student loans, complicated mortgages. And by the way, when we're talking about financial advice, don't quit at retirement. People past going through retirement also need financial advice to be able to not run out of money in old age. So let me stop there. Our colleagues are going to say more. And here are just some of the books you can download for free, if you wish, from the Pension Research Council website. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Great. Olivia, being a professor, produce slides. The rest of us can talk from here. Janelle?
So as Josh said, in my job at the Washington Post, I write a lot about a lot of different topics. And my focus as a personal finance writer really comes down to not only what are the challenges that people face, but what can you do, what should you be doing to avoid some of these issues, to prepare and to be financially secure. And whenever I write about young people and the challenges and, well, what should young people be doing, there's always this huge sort of backlash at my stories. People are sort of looking at it and saying, that seems out of touch. How do you expect me to accomplish this? Don't you know, maybe 50 years ago that was realistic. Right now, it's a little bit out of the question. And we always sort of have to reassess that and sort of look at, well, what are the baby steps or what are the small things that people can do? But I also wanted to talk a little bit about why is it that that's the reaction that I'm getting. And, when you look at, people today, especially if you're in your 20s or in your 30s, you're dealing with a lot of the things that have always been challenges for people, but also a couple of things that are different now, right? You might have come into the workforce at a time when the economy was just at the lowest point it's been in decades. If you got a job, the paycheck was smaller than usual. Also, raises are sort of a thing of the past. Well, for now, temporarily speaking, that's getting better, thankfully. But the rent is high, and for a lot of young people today, they're dealing with student loan payments that are either as high or higher than the rent check. And so to save for retirement, to tell people to save for retirement, something that could be 20, 30, 40, 50 years away, it seems to be, for some people, it feels like a little bit of a luxury. And so you have to think about, what can be done? What should you do now? When you look at, what are employers doing? That's also something that the solution seems to be put it in the hands of the worker. And pensions, as we know, are going away. In many cases, the match, if there is one, is minimal. And it's just a responsibility that people are intimidated by. They don't know where to start. There's a lot of discussion now about fees and how, those fees can eat into people's retirement savings in the long run. You may not even have a good understanding of what the fees are. And so in terms of the solutions that have been more promising, it seems to be really centered around making it as easy as possible for people to save, using the inertia that a lot of consumers face around these issues and making it work in their favor somehow by doing it for them. Automatic enrollment, making it, again, as easy as possible. Part of that, of course, is access to retirement plans, as we've been discussing today. if you're low income or if you have a part-time job, as a lot of younger people do today, you might not even have a plan to begin with. So the first step is getting people access to a plan and then making it as easy as possible for them to sign up and participate. So a lot of what I write about too, I look at automatic enrollment, but of course, that's not enough. A lot of times people are being started at rates that are very low. Most of the time you hear about 3% savings rate. We all know here that that's not enough realistically. So we're seeing some companies push the envelope there, getting people started at much higher rates. And in some cases, you see that they stick with it. You put someone in a plan, have them save even as much as 9% or more of their pay. And I think you see that sometimes people, once it's done for them, they will stick with it if it's made easy. But of course, this is part of the ongoing discussion. And there are more things that need to be done.
Jean?
Great, thank you. I want to thank Brookings, Josh, and also the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau and also Social Security Administration for inviting me to this conversation today. Director Cordray referenced this earlier. There are 10,000 baby boomers retiring every single day. And it's not just for this year. It's actually going to carry on for the next 15 plus years. So it couldn't be timelier for us to talk about this today and into our distant future. And this is also alluded to by many of our speakers today. Planning for retirement is a very complicated task. People are really not wired to do this for many reasons. Retirement is a long, long ways away, so it's very in the distant, and we know that future decisions are always harder and just unrealistic just because it doesn't feel real to many people. It's not life is no longer a simple equation either. There's so many uncertainties in life. So the new normal is several jobs, marriage, likely divorce, and a much longer life as well. There's several demands on our money, and we know at AARP that college savings actually is sidelining many of our members' retirement security. Money matters are complicated, and I love to tell the story. I come from a family of two, my sister and I. She's a doctor, and I've been in the money field for many years. Mind you, my sister is an OBGYN. My father will ask her just about any medical question under the sun, mostly urological questions. Again, OBGYN, money matters, not a question for me. So it's really interesting that money matters also from a behavioral standpoint on individuals is something that's very secret and very individualized, even though I would argue with my sister oftentimes that the capital markets are just as complicated as brain surgery in many ways, right? And yet people won't seek help on these issues, whereas, for health matters, it's much easier. Having said all that in terms of difficult decisions, individuals are actually forced to be in the driver's seat today, whether they like it or not. So these are all the factors that are working against them. So I don't think it's a surprise that roughly 10 years ago, beginning of the Retirement Security Project here at Brookings, AARP also started to look at these key decisions for consumers. And we realized that a couple of really important key decisions make the biggest impact in the long term. Social Security claiming decisions by far is one of the biggest. Retirement assets, how to accumulate assets as well as wind that down, pay yourself from those assets, also very critical. What to do with your home, also another important aspect. And work, which AARP oftentimes calls the new retirement, is probably the last key decision. So as we've conducted a lot of research and also looked at the experience interacting with our members, one of the most stark things that we've discovered in terms of when consumers actually go out and do financial planning on their own for retirement begins at the age of 58 and 59. So if we, again, leave it to individuals to do it on their own, more often than not, it's too late. And more often than not, it's not enough for us to actually just work with individuals. So again, AARP's been really focused not only on individual education, but also working with employers as well as the government to really build an environment that's ripe for helping individuals make the best decision. But let me tell you a little bit about our experience working with individuals. Since we're actually dealing with adults and education, the key difference here between adulthood education versus childhood education is that it's voluntary. They will only use education, quite honestly, when it's just in time, when they need that information to make a decision. So much of what we do is try to be there just in time in order to educate. So we look for trigger events. Social Security is one of the most universal decisions, right? So that's one of the key reasons why education around that period is so critical. So really applaud the CFPB for actually focusing in on that. Some other triggers that are important, that are reoccurring that we love, taxes, open enrollment, those again, we want to be in the stream of decision making when it comes to those circumstances. One of the other things that we also learned, because there aren't enough life triggers, is creating false triggers. Incentive-based decision-making is really effective. So we've been using sweepstakes, quite honestly, for the past couple of years, and it has been a very interesting way for us to teach. So the past couple of years, for a prize of $50,000, we get on average about 500,000 people engaging with us over a three-month period. And in those 3 months, we actually see them taking 6 different actions. So interesting enough, not only can we just take advantage of life triggers, maybe sometimes we have to create those triggers on our own. So some of the things that we've learned from our experience also that have been alluded to as well, personalized information is really what motivates decision making, because again, it's making real that decision. So the more that you personalize it, bring it into the individual circumstances with calculators, really helps motivate action. Also, another interesting thing that we learned, because we've been pressing this whole issue of money with folks, and I applaud Janelle for her work with her personal finance columns, but oftentimes how we get to money issues is not actually talking about money. It's around life. So again, adulthood education versus childhood education, life is our school. So the more that we can be in the course, in the stream of life, and teaching them, the better it is. And lastly, I think this has been talked about before too. So all these circumstances bring it to reality. The more that we can do that, the better we can educate. Janelle alluded to this before, so I won't talk a lot about the workplace education or workplace efforts, but really, workplace savings is the best way to actually accumulate assets. If you have an employer plan, you're 15 times more likely to save than you are if you don't have a plan. So the more that employers can actually provide a plan, so giving access to their employees, important, very, very important. And also optimizing those plans are also critical as well, making it easy and also accumulating at the right contribution levels and having cost-effective options, also critical. This whole notion of fees and understanding investment fees, so difficult. Just to give you another anecdote, we have multiple tools on our AARP site, and we roughly spend about the same investment marketing them. Around investment fees and our fee calculator, we got 5,000 people using it, whereas normally we have millions of uses. So very odd, again, very irrational decisions around fees and not understanding them. So let me just kind of wrap up there by saying that not only is it important for us to understand consumers in order to educate them, but creating the environment to help them make those decisions are critical, and would love to engage further on that topic.
Let me just ask a couple of questions and then we'll open it up. One of the points that Janelle raised is an effort by states, because Eugene talked about the importance of having workplace savings.
Absolutely.
Make it easy. Janelle mentioned the fact that several states are trying to balance and require mostly small businesses, but businesses that don't have anything, to use their payroll system and have there be automatic payroll deduction into some sort of retirement savings plan. Be curious as to what Jean and Olivia, you all think about that effort. And what
We're in strong support of that. Again, using the state solutions like Illinois Secure Choice efforts is a good step in the right direction to help encourage small businesses to provide access to employer-based savings through a payroll deduction, which again is the facilitator to accumulate assets. So it's an important step forward. I think My RA is also another effort down that path. So the more, again, we can get a more employer-based savings, I think that is a critical key to helping employees really accumulate those assets.
Well, so I have sort of mixed feelings about the state plans. I'll be honest.
I knew I'd get an argument eventually.
Pretty much every state plan wants to avoid the oversight of ERISA, which is the federal legislation governing pensions. And I know why they want to avoid it, because it's costly, there's mountains of regulation, there's fiduciary obligations, and so on and so on. On the other hand, there's a reason that ERISA obligations are important, because they do protect the saver. They try to make sure that he or she who designs the investment menu does a good job. The other question that I raise is that people who don't have retirement plans now are probably going to have very small accounts, at least for a long time when they first get started. And it's not obvious to me that the right vehicle would be a marketplace-based retirement account, which some of the states are talking about. So a different approach might be to say, let's go with the MyRA national scheme, which is going to be invested extremely conservatively, but only up to a point where one has, I believe, $15,000. Right. And at that point, then, I think it would be possible and beneficial for the individual to take the money and roll it over into some sort of a marketplace managed account. But I think that sort of double two-step process would work better than having every state invent something new when you already have a pretty good idea out there, which is the MyRA.
Part of the challenge, this is something which, outside of my role as moderator, I've spent a lot of time working on. Part of the challenge is, Olivia, that in exchange for requiring participation by employers, whether it's just saying to the businesses that don't offer anything, you have to open up your payroll system. Part of the reason why states have been reluctant to adopt the ERISA, well, is that these are all employers who've basically offered nothing, had the option of offering an ERISA plan and not taken it. And so I think the states are making an implicit trade-off, which is, in order to get mandatory auto-enrollment, I'm accepting a lesser standard. Now, one thing that is important to note is that the Department of Labor has noticed this challenge too, and has announced, the president announced, that the Department of Labor would issue guidance to enable states to do both. And so I'm hoping this one goes on. Let me ask a kind of a generic question, and then everybody admits this is complicated. Everybody admits that that a lot of people, not everybody, the people in this room, of course, are exceptions, but a lot of people don't do it. Is retirement too complicated to leave to individuals? Do you have to go to a mandated system like Social Security in order to actually get people to save? What's your view, Janelle?
It seems like a combination effort seems to be the best approach. Yes, people should save. Yes, you should make it as easy as possible for them to save. But with wages being low for many people, the fact that it is complicated and the risk out there in the market, to leave it up to the individual completely, we're not ready for that yet, it doesn't seem. So to increase savings, but to still have something else like Social Security in place, or to at least until we're at the point where people are prepared to and really know that this is a part of their financial plan, to encourage them and to sort of put them in the habit as easily as possible, I think, is the part.
I think I'd have to agree with Janelle. I think just because a decision is too complicated, I don't think you take away the control of that right away through more of a, again, controlled solution. So I think a tiered approach is probably right. But there's an interesting thing that I think we're observing around default systems as well as individual control. So what I'm referring to is in the 401k world, as auto features become more popular, which again, we're very much in favor of, one of the things that we're also seeing as a byproduct, not a great byproduct, is that we have more folks asleep at the wheel, so to speak, zombie investors, because they're more passive again, feeling like, okay, this is taken care of, I can forget about it, I don't have to be responsible for it anymore. That's actually not a good thing, right? Just because we have a system that facilitates savings, I think we have to be just as adamant in trying to educate folks, because we want them to be engaged. We want them to know what's going on. And lastly, I'll say retirement for individuals is so individualized today. We talked about the complexities. There's far fewer standards in terms of how people live. So I think a lot of those issues really complicate matters, but at the same time, individuals really do need to have control over their life and their decisions.
So my mantra is work longer, save more, and expect less. And I think that's the reality for all of us in the room, our children and our children's children. I think successful countries that are going to be able to deal successfully with population aging will have to have a social safety net. That's inevitable. Mm-hmm. But how much more the countries can afford above and beyond that is going to vary across the world. The biggest area where I think we haven't focused enough in the U.S. is around the decumulation phase. We're doing pretty good with auto enrollment and target date funds. We're doing a good job helping people diversify their investment. But we have a giant gap, which is how to help people not run out of money in retirement. And so to me, that's very high on the priority list.
I'm a fan. Let's open up to questions from the audience. Remember the Brookings rule. Identify yourself, and your statement should end with a question mark. Jason.
Good morning. My name's Jason Fickner. I'm with the Mercatus Center at George Mason University. And one of the themes this morning we've seen is sort of the importance of the claiming decision and when people make the claiming decision, and the importance of framing that information as well. And we've started seeing this discussion of how can we maybe change to incentivize people to claim later without doing anything in law. So, for example, we have the early eligibility age 62. And I think people look at that and see the word early and think, oh, I can retire early, so I should do it earlier. We have the full or normal retirement age, which statistically is not normal and mathematically is not full because you can get greater benefits now at 70. Should we change the nomenclature so that age 62 should be called the reduced retirement age, forget 66 and 67, and then just talk about 70 being the full or maximum retirement age, just for framing purposes alone?
I assume that hidden in there was the question, what do you think?
I was talking with other people who do the same thing as we do, just about this same topic a few weeks ago, and that was one of the thoughts, which is maybe the full retirement age should be marketed as 70, and then we call, 67 something else, but 62 being, and it sort of comes back to what Olivia was talking about. If you frame it a little bit differently, people might, the connotation is really important.
Let's not forget, however, that 70 may not be the age at which we're able to let people retire in the future. The problem, I think, is throughout our whole tax and benefit system, we have all these weird ages. So you no longer have to pay a penalty if you take money out of your IRA or your 401k at 59 and a half. Where'd that come from? We have 62 for early retirement. Why? 65 was the old normal, but we know that's not really normal. I think we need actually a very nice review and overhaul of how we use ages and the messages that people take from these ages. And probably we shouldn't cap folks out at 70 either. In other words, if you continue to work after 70 and don't take your benefit, then why not get a delayed claiming benefit after that? So I would just take age out of the whole thing and structure the benefits as makes sense.
Any other actions? More questions? The gentleman 2/3 of the way back?
So Social Security is a great inflation indexed annuity. Ed Bartholomew representing myself. Social Security is a great inflation indexed annuity that we talk about, but for someone who's retiring after 2034, should they really consider whatever numbers they get off the My Social Security website to be actually what they're going to get, given that we know that either taxes are going to have to be raised or the cost of living taken away or reduced or benefits reduced?
I wish the commissioner were still here. I think she's left.
Yes.
So what would you say?
Social Security is a fundamental element of retirement security. So in many ways, I think we always have to really consider that as the foundational piece. I think the more that you question that, it actually starts to erode it faster. So from an AARP standpoint, we always want to consider how you, again, fortify, secure, and ensure that that's our foundation into perpetuity. So I think that's what I would say in response to your question.
I guess I work with a lot of financial advisors. We teach them in our education programs at Wharton, probably teach 1,000 of them a year. And I'll tell you what I tell them. I say, first of all, nobody knows whether current benefits will continue to be paid, given that current projected revenue is insufficient to meet those benefit bills. So I say, as a risk manager, what you ought to be doing is presenting different scenarios to your clients. One option would be to say, assume the current scheduled benefits do get paid. What that's going to mean is somebody's going to have to pay a lot more in taxes. Another option is assume that the benefits don't grow as much as they would otherwise, so that they can just live within the current projected revenue. And so then benefits would have to be cut by about 1/3. You know, so it's not zero. A lot of the young folks think benefits won't be there at all for me. And I have to say, no, that's incorrect. But there's a range where we just don't know what the future is. And I think it's responsible to discuss the range.
I'm Harriet Edelson. I'm representing myself today, and I write for a couple of different newspapers, but okay. So if you look at when the Social Security benefits would be cut in 2034, the people who are around 60 or 61 or 62 or 65 will be then in their 80s. If those benefits do get cut, those people can't go back to work. Most people will not be able to go back to work at 85. So what I'm suggesting or asking, my question is, how can you set out, not necessarily an alarm, but lobby or do whatever is necessary to see that that problem doesn't arrive at the time when all these 10,000 people a day are turning 65 and then will be then about 85. Can anybody address what can be done then? That's my question.
As a matter of public finance, there is always the opportunity when you're talking about baseload programs to fund them. And historically, that has been the decision. It was the decision in the budget bill 2 weeks ago or whatever, et cetera. I'm not sure that anybody in the panel is the right person to discuss what are the options for, actually Brookings had a discussion of that a couple of weeks ago, so if you want to go back in time, you can do it. But I think the notion that, so I'm not sure this is the right group to discuss the questions of, over the next 30 years, how will the nation decide to fund its seniors through Social Security? But I would note that for the last 80, it has chosen to do so by paying taxes on those who are still working. And the idea that somehow the world is going to change has yet to be evidenced in this or any other developed nation.
So I just put a little asterisk and a footnote there, because we do know that the 1983 Greenspan Commission that had to deal with Social Security insolvency, there were about 3 months of money left to be able to keep benefit checks being paid. So that was a big crisis back then. And they did raise the revenues coming into the system by raising taxes, but they also cut benefits, and they cut them prospectively in the sense that people who were going to be retiring in the future would be able to claim their full benefits later. They also changed the inflation indexing. So we can't say benefits have never been cut, because that's certainly not the case. We do know that there are opportunities to also raise financing. So I think that, you know, what I would recommend is, hey, we have a presidential election coming up. I would put the feet of every one of those candidates to the fire and say, what are you planning to do? Let's do it now with some anticipation, so I don't have to be 85 years old and facing a big benefit cut. I think that's the honest thing I would do.
It is noon, which is when I promised folks we would stop. It's very clear that this is a subject in which, if the commissioner had stayed, or if Director Cordray, who did stay, were still on the podium, we could be asking questions for a long time, to say nothing of our panelists. So let me do some, and these are obviously issues which are going to be ongoing. Let me first start by thanking Sarah Holmes and the AV staff here at Brookings and the facility staff who put this together. In addition, and both Director Cordray and Commissioner Colvin mentioned, but the staffs of the Social Security Administration and the CFPB did one of the hardest things it is to do, which is to work with somebody outside your agency. And so I want to thank them for bringing this together and making that possible. I want to thank our panelists. And then I want to thank Commissioner Colvin, who had to go, and Director Cordray, who stayed. Thank you, Brent, for making this possible. Keep it up.